And we're standing here right now. It's the second day of the CETW Show. We just finished up a great talk by Patrick Quinn with the panel of a group of people from different networks. We had Verifone on the panel. We had a couple different people from some agencies as well, talking about precision targeting with digital out of home. Patrick, obviously responsible for PQ Media and the forecasts that come out, really the kind of definitive numbers on this space in terms of econometrics. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. We have seen a upward growth in digital signage and this kind of DPNs, as you guys talk about, which is digital place-based networks, for the past couple of years, but now things are looking a little bit differently. Talk about the second half of 2011.
Sure. For 2011, the first half was very strong for digital place-based networks across all categories except for cinema, which ran into they had really tough comps. They had a first quarter last year that was just phenomenal. So this year, the first half was tough, but they were expecting a very strong scatter market in the second half of the year. Cinema, the reason starting with that is because it's a monster category, almost 700 million of the total 1.5 billion. So it definitely impacts the growth rates. And so what happened was in the second half we had this August where economic sentiment and doubts arose, and we had the government issues not being able to come to agreement on a number of important things related to the economy, and the government recalibrating their economic forecast, which made the recession look even deeper than we originally thought, longer than we thought, and also the recovery slower than we thought. So we had to recalibrate our own economic forecast from what we're seeing and hearing, and you mentioned the global opinion leader panel that we speak to in confidence on a regular basis, and we had to dial back our own forecasts, and I think what we see is a deceleration in the second half and into the first half, and that hopefully based on current data, and this may change, it's a bit nebulous in 2012, probably relatively slow in the first half, and we should see a real recovery begin sometime in the second half of the year without any artificial stimulus. I think that needs to, we got to stop printing money, let this thing, bottom out, and we'll see probably a relatively slow recovery, certainly that what we've seen in our lifetimes. But how it relates to this business is the combination of the economics and the huge television upfront, $23 billion that were generated or invested in the broadcast and cable television upfront, sucked a lot of money out of the advertising system, and so that's why we're counting on the scatter. And so those two combinations, it was a record upfront of $23 billion. It was up 8% on broadcast side. It was up 16% cable, which was a huge record. And so, there wasn't a lot left as budgets tightened in the third and fourth quarter. Not much left to spend on emerging media. And so now you have mobile and social and digital place-based networks and online video competing for those same lesser dollars. And I think that's had an impact on everyone. But what we saw, cinema in the low single digits after having a big year last year. But the other categories, retail, office, transit, entertainment, all had really good double-digit up first halves. They all accelerated over last year. But in the second half, they were impacted as well by the economy and the upfront and agencies tightening budgets a little bit for their clients. So there was a deceleration, or there appears to be. We're in November now, so there's still 6 weeks left. But what we're predicting at this point is that there's going to be a few point deceleration. The second half will end up with around 10% growth for the overall digital place-based network industry after 12% acceleration in the first half. But if you take cinema out of that equation, we had about 20% growth in the first half and decelerating to 17% growth for the year. Now, maybe give or take by the end of the year, but that's about where we are.
Now, in our industry, that's something that's been pretty normal, and I think if you look at it in comparison to social media and mobile and the acceleration that they're seeing in terms of ad dollars spent, it's minimal, but still, we're talking 17%. That's pretty good. In any sort of industry, that would be pretty good. What do network operators doing right in terms of enabling that continual growth?
I think that this panel was all about that. The precision targeting is huge, and that's why we had this panel and why we chose some of the folks to be on the panel that we did. Chris Polos from Verifone and Dan Stone from Accent Health, as well as Greg Patrick from VukuNet, the ad-serving platform, Martin Porter from the digital place-based ad agency, but to the two networks that were on the panel. Dan Stone's group, Accent Health, is in the point of care space, doctor's offices, which falls into our office category, which is the fastest growing among the categories, in the 25% plus range. And there's some reasons for that, precision targeting being one of them. There's long dwell times in those in doctors' offices. There's good content, relevant content to those who are in the office. Everybody waits for a certain amount of time when you're in the doctor's office, so you're able to precision target. If you've got good, relevant, contextually relevant content and contextually relevant advertising messages for these folks, that they tend to show very good recall and success for both the end users and the networks themselves. So also with Chris and Verifone is they have a taxi network, an in-taxi network, and now they're building out into the gas stations. There, they have a real sort of a unique situation, but a strong one, where they almost don't need to be talking to Nielsen and Arbitron, some of these other research firms, because they know that you're in the taxi, because you have a transaction-based system. So they know who was there, they know what they paid, they know, and they have an interactive screen. So they've got touch points and a receipt. So, that's what we call guaranteed impressions, So I think as we see the industry evolving, and the question about, why aren't we seeing hockey stick growth in this space right now? Mobile's up 50%, and internet is started to level off, but still growing fast. And digital place-based networks is up there in that top three, but there's some big differences there. Digital place-based networks, I think, are evolving at a point where we're seeing the shakeout and consolidation phase lasting for a number of years, and it could last for a number more. I think what we're going to see is a couple of roll-up phases here over the next couple of years, where there's going to be financiers, perhaps other investors that come in, or networks themselves that are acquiring networks, or will be financed to acquire other networks around audience. They're going to the strong networks in these venue categories that have the captive audiences, the long dwell times, the good sight lines, not very noisy, etc. Are going to be the strong that survive. At least that's the way it's shaping up right now. And so I think they will begin to roll up audiences around those networks, and then you'll have a second round later on where you then, once you create that roll up, then you create margin and EBITDA, and then it becomes spun off, and probably down the road, at least that's historically, then you have they're spun off to big media companies, technology companies, telecom companies. So we'll see what happens, but a number of our predictions over the last 2 years have come to pass, as far as the growth, which is right on at 16-17% for the year. The fact that the shakeout and consolidation phase was going to last for a while, and how it would evolve, that a number of these smaller networks, our research shows that over 90% of the place-based networks in the U.S. are generating less than $10 million in revenue. A lot of those guys are going to get rolled up, or going to shutter. They're already begun to, or merged and acquired, to create a stronger set of operators with better audience and metrics, scale, and then I think you're going to see a real growth into a mature growth business, and that's how media has evolved over many, many years. Certainly how the cable business evolved, and a lot of people like to equate where place-based networks are, or digital out-of-home, to where cable was 30 years ago, and it took that amount of time to consolidate down to the 5 players that basically run the business today.
Absolutely. Really good points. Listen, there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to. Patrick, we appreciate it. You should definitely check out the future forecast. Go to pqmedia.com. Check it out. If you're interested in the data and some of the numbers, like you said, they've been notoriously accurate. I've written it myself, so you can learn a lot from these different reports. So thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you.